Greetings. Uh, Much later start than I intended, but sometimes things happen. And anyway, here we are. We've got a short session today. The defense is going to rest, and I guess we'll probably have closing arguments on Monday. And I think I'll probably wait until tomorrow to do the second day of the Rust armor shooting. And so without further ado, let's get started.
The court will take up the court should not refer to them as preliminary matters. Did counsel receive a filing by Attorney Frost?
Yes, sir. I did. I received it last night. I did not have a chance to read it, but I was handed paper copies by Attorney Frost, who's present in the courtroom.
Thank you. What the court intends to do after having reviewed the filing, the court is going to recuse itself in the matter of the contempt hearing for Michelle Troconis, pursuant to practice book section 1-19. That matter will be scheduled before Judge Hernandez. Court understands the practice book requires
There's a document that I would be displaying using the Elmo that would be admitted without objection by the state, just pursuant to a discussion that we had. Procedurally, the only other matter would be, and I might as well do it now since the court asked, I would at this point move that in light of the testimony that came out through the defense, that the redacted portion of the Dr. Herman report, which is just that's been filed under seal, the first unsealed and then made a full exhibit. I have the court knows what I'm referring to. It was marked for identification. It was sealed pursuant to a sealing request, but I would just make that formal request that is part of the defense that we would want that portion of the document to be presented in light of the evidence that has been presented.
So which marker was that, Attorney Sherman? Which exhibit number?
Could I just have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
I think it's F.
Yes, it's exhibit FF for identification, Your Honor.
So the court will order that document unsealed.
May I just inquire? May I just take a look at it, Your Honor?
It's still sealed. The court
I
did not-
actually am objecting to this, Your Honor. This would be part of the Herman report. Your Honor, ordered sealed. So I don't think that was made clear for the record. This was made in connection with Attorney Meehan's testimony, and Attorney Felsen attempted to put this in and asked to make it an ID. Your Honor indicated that this is subject to a protective order. You are not allowing this in, and allowed it under seal. That order and that ruling, I believe, still is in effect. So the state would argue that it should not become unsealed. Also, I would indicate.
Well, before you proceed, the court was under the impression that was a document that was filed yesterday concerning yesterday's witness.
No,
No, Your Honor.
If I was unclear, I apologize. This was offered at that time. The court did not allow it, and then it's pursuant to the court's order filed under seal, and it does remain under seal. I was asking that in light of the testimony from yesterday, that it be unsealed, and then I would be offering that portion. And again, it's just the conclusions, does not go in, and the court is also aware the names of the children are all redacted in any event, and that would be the offer that it would be making as part of the defense.
Well, the state has objected. The court at this time will sustain the objection.
That's fine, Your Honor.
Now, at what times are your witnesses scheduled approximately?
Professor Marion is here. She arrived last night. She's here in the courtroom, and I know that the second witness is also here and is prepared to testify this morning. And then, like I said, there is an exhibit related to the, I'll just say it's related to the scientific examination of the 2017 Suburban. It relates to that, and the state, in conjunction with the defense, had a discussion about whether there was a need to call the record keeper of that document, and by agreement, that officer would not be necessary, and he's been subpoenaed, but he's not going to be.
If it's what counsel emailed to the state and we discussed it, Your Honor, I have no objection to that document just coming in without any comments or the like, as well as the testimony. That is fine. But perhaps we can do that we can mark it at the time in front of the jury. I don't have an objection to that.
I would like to get done with the witnesses so there isn't any delay.
So the court would inquire of counsel if both witnesses are scheduled for this morning. Is it possible that we can proceed with the charge conference this afternoon?
With this caveat, Your Honor, I was meeting with the expert last night and then trying to work on my proposed jury instructions. So we could certainly begin that, but I do have some proposals that are not completed, and I do not like to submit things that are grammatically incorrect that refer to his, her. I like to file it not as a sort of generic type thing. I would tailor mine to the evidence as I think the practice book does require. So with the caveat that we not complete it today, because I was hoping to be able to work on that this afternoon with Attorney Felsen.
Well, we might as well not proceed today with the charge conference and just go forward on Monday, which means that if we go forward with the charge conference on Monday, we're not going to have closing arguments on Monday. They'll be scheduled for Tuesday.
I was actually going to say I agree with Attorney Schoenhorn. We're still drafting ours as well, and that would be a good schedule for the state as well.
Okay, thank you. Are we ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. I just want to approach the clerk if I may.
Bring the jury up.
No, I haven't marked it up.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
The defense has informed the court that it probably will rest today, which means that on Monday, if the defense rests today, on Monday, there would have to go forward what is called a charge conference. A charge conference is essentially a legal proceeding wherein the court and counsel will review the instructions to be given to you. So your presence would not be needed on Monday as there will be no witnesses. On Tuesday, counsel will be prepared to go forward with closing arguments in the case. Attorney Schoenhorn.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense calls Professor Viorica.
You could please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or solemnly and sincerely affirm, as the case may be, that the evidence you shall give concerning this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, or upon penalty of perjury?
I do.
Please state your name and spell it for the record.
Viorica Marian, spelled Viorica-Marian.
Thank you.
And you may be seated.
Good morning, Dr. Marian.
Good morning.
Would you please indicate to the members of the jury, first of all, where are you from and what is your occupation?
Where am I from originally, or where did I come from now?
Where do you work?
I work at Northwestern University in Chicago, in Evanston, as a professor of communication sciences and disorders, psychology, and cognitive science.
I'm going to ask if you could speak up a little because I don't know if that microphone is actually amplifying or just for recording purposes. So I'm going to ask, that's why I'm standing back here. I know you have a
Okay.
sort of soft voice. Could you indicate what department are you in at Northwestern University?
My primary appointment is in communication sciences and disorders. I also have a secondary appointment in psychology, and I'm also affiliated with linguistics and cognitive science, and Buffett Institute for International Relations and several other academic units.
Is there a linguistics department at Northwestern University?
Yes, there is.
And do you hold a position there as well?
As an affiliated faculty, I'm a psychologist by training.
But could you explain what it means to be an affiliated faculty?
My research crosses between or combined psychology and linguistics. I'm a psycholinguist, which is a field at the intersection of psychology and linguistics. So having an affiliate appointment in another department means that you can advise students in that department, you can participate in department activities and life.
Are you also affiliated because you indicated that your field crosses multiple disciplines? Are there other portions of Northwestern University or other departments that you're affiliated with as a faculty member?
Yes, my secondary appointment is in psychology. I'm also affiliated with the developmental science program, the cognitive science program, and the Buffett Institute for International Relations.
Could you tell us a little bit about your educational background, starting with college?
Sure. I went to college at the University of Alaska, where I first started doing research. I then received my master's degree in cognitive and developmental psychology at Emory University in Atlanta. From there, I went to upstate New York at Cornell University in Ithaca, where I received a second master's in psychology and then a PhD in psychology as well.
Have you held other positions prior to your current one in the academic field?
I was recruited to Northwestern straight out of Cornell, and I've had other positions during my appointment at Northwestern, for example, at the National Institutes of Health, but they were while I was primarily employed at Northwestern.
Have you held any positions as chair of any of the departments at Northwestern University?
Yes, I was chair of the Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders at Northwestern, and I was chair of the Language and Communication Studies section at the National Institutes of Health.
You indicated previously that your field crosses many disciplines. Could you explain how it is that your field, you're a psychologist, right?
Mhm.
You have
Yes.
a PhD.
Yes.
How does that cross into the other fields that you mentioned?
So more broadly, I study cognitive science. I study the interaction between mind and language, which crosses into other fields as well. So most people know that we use our mind to learn language, to understand language, and to produce language, that our mind influences our language. But the opposite is also true. The language we speak influences how we think and influences how our brain functions. And my primary area is bilingualism and multilingualism. I study how learning a second, third, or more languages changes the way people think, the way our brain functions, cognitive abilities of cognitive function in multiple ways, how we perceive the world, how we remember things, basically the influence of language and multiple languages on our cognitive function.
Just so that that I understand, could you just explain what it means to say cognitive function in more simple terms?
Yes, cognitive function is an umbrella term that covers things like attention, memory, perception, basically language as well, creativity, decision making. So cognition, thought, thinking, another way to say it.
Are you a clinical professor or do you teach, or both?
I'm a research-oriented faculty. I don't do clinical work. I run a research lab and I teach as well.
Are these, you have students that are within, that come to your lab and that you teach as well? Or you
Yes.
supervise?
Yes, I train PhD students, postdoctoral students, master's students, and undergraduate students who want to do research.
Do you have any specific interest within those multiple or multidisciplinary fields that you concentrate your research on?
Yes, my primary area of focus is consequences of bilingualism on cognition, language, and the brain, how the languages we speak shape the way we think.
Have you received any honorariums or awards for your work?
Yes, I have received several awards for my research, for my publications, and for my teaching. Most recently, this past weekend, I received the American Association for the Advancement of Science John McGovern Award for research in behavioral sciences.
In fact, did I reach out to you for communication about preparing for today while you were at that conference?
Yes, yes, you
So
did.
you weren't home at the Northwestern University at the time?
Correct.
Where was the conference, did you say?
In Denver,
Denver,
Colorado.
Colorado.
Mhm.
Could you tell me whether or not you've received any other training besides your educational background? In other words, besides your academic background?
Yes, I've taken additional courses on, for example, functional neuroimaging of the brain at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City. And throughout the years, I regularly attend professional meetings and conferences and workshops to make sure that I stay up to date on new techniques, new research methods, statistical analysis, that as science progresses and advances, I continue to stay current on advancements and developments.
Have you given presentations or talks at any of those conferences?
Yes, I have given several hundred presentations and lectures and teachings and workshops on language and cognition, language and mind, bilingualism, multilingualism, these areas.
Have you published in the area of bilingualism and the effect on brain function?
Yes,
How many, just roughly, how many papers and or books or portions of books have you published?
over 200 publications in total. And my book on language and mind, on bilingualism and multilingualism, came out last year.
Have you received any national grants to conduct research in your field?
Yes, I have received grants from the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, Northwestern University, and private foundations.
As part of your work as a scientist in this area, you also consulted with other professionals who are conducting similar work in this area.
Yes, I work closely and collaborate with people all over the world, and most any lab in any country around the world, we frequently interact and collaborate and discuss research.
And I was going to walk over there, but I'll ask you the question first. Did you, in the last week, send me an updated curriculum vitae, a resume that lists your various academic, both history and the articles and publications that you have either co-authored or authored yourself?
Yes.
Sorry.
No objection.
And what would be the marking, please?
It's marked double Y for identification. Approaching the witness, could you just tell us whether this is your most recent curriculum vitae?
Yes, I believe so.
And does this list all your educational achievements, your research that has been peer reviewed, and your publications?
If it's the one I sent you, then yes.
Well, if you would check the date maybe on the top of page one.
Sure.
the Most recent one?
Yes.
Okay. And when was this version of your curriculum vitae CV published?
This was updated January 2024.
And I'm not gonna, how many pages is this? This is just for the record, I'm not gonna put it up on the screen right now, just tell us on the page.
63?
63, okay.
Yes.
And I'll just, if I may, just hold it up so the jury knows which document you're on.
Is that YY?
Why not? I'll get on to it in a moment. Now, Professor Marion, were you at some point contacted by my office for purposes of consultation?
Yes,
Was that specifically in the area of bilingualism and the effect on communication and memory?
yes,
Did I, at some point, subsequent to our conversation, enter into a written contract with you regarding that subject matter?
yes,
And did you sign such an agreement?
yes,
And I signed the agreement as well?
yes.
I'm going to show you what has been marked. I'll show her, and then I'm going to show you what has been marked as ZZ for identification.
Mhm.
And if you just look at that 3-page document, tell us whether that is the agreement that we entered into.
Yes.
I would offer ZZ as a full exhibit.
No objection.
ZZ admitted as full.
I just want to call your attention to the fact that we agreed on a price for your services. Is that correct?
Correct.
Could you just tell the members of the jury what the agreements is for purposes of your compensation for being a witness or a consultant for this case?
My salary is $600 an hour.
And how many hours would you say at this point, up till this moment, that you've spent on this case?
I have been paid $1,800 to date. I have not yet sat down to calculate all the hours.
Was that specifically in the area of bilingualism and the effect on communication and memory?
Yes,
Did I, at some point subsequent to our conversation, enter into a written contract with you regarding that subject matter?
yes,
And did you sign such an agreement?
yes,
And I signed the agreement as well?
yes.
I'm going to show you what has been marked. I'll show her in a minute. I'm going to show you what has been marked as ZZ for identification.
Mhm.
And if you just look at that 3-page document, tell us whether that is the agreement that we entered
Yes.
into.
Yes.
I would offer ZZ as a full exhibit.
No objections.
ZZ admitted as full.
I just want to call your attention to the fact that we agreed on a price for your services. Is that correct?
Correct.
Could you just tell the members of the jury what the agreements is for purposes of your compensation for being a witness or a consultant for this case?
My salary is $600 an hour.
And how many hours would you spend on this case?
I have been paid $1,800 to date. I have not yet sat down to calculate all the hours, although I've kept track of them, but I haven't yet calculated them all together.
In any event, if I may just pull this up to the jury. And when did we enter into this agreement?
A little over 3 years ago,
You want to
in
look at
February 2021.
2021.
Mhm.
Would you indicate, please, for the jury, a little bit about what is bilingualism? Can you explain that, please?
Bilingualism is a person's ability to communicate in more than one language. So learning a second language and being able to use it. And of course, there is a range of proficiency and different kinds of bilingualism, but in general terms, being able to, having studied more than one language, either as a child or as a grown-up, it's an umbrella term.
Are there different levels of proficiency for bilingualism, even if somebody's considered bilingual?
Yes, bilinguals differ on many parameters. Proficiency is one of the most salient one, but bilinguals also differ in at what age they learn the second language, the manner they learn the second language, how they use a second language, frequency, settings in which they use it, many different parameters. So two people may be bilingual, but they may differ in vast ways, how similar the languages that they know are.
Are there ways to determine a level of proficiency in a foreign language?
Yes,
And what I mean by that is objective measures that you're able to make that determination.
yes, you can determine proficiency in any language by either giving someone as a test or by analyzing their language use, either by analyzing video, audio recordings, or transcripts of their language use, based on the vocabulary they use, the grammar they use, the phonology they use, various linguistic parameters. You can determine how proficient someone is in a language.
Are there other objective criteria by which, besides the ones you just mentioned, in the form of sentence structure, words that are used, particular mannerisms that also aid you in making those determinations?
Yes, so there are, within the umbrella term that I said, by analyzing someone's language, someone's speech patterns, you can make inferences about their proficiency, make assessments about their proficiency. There are multiple parameters. Would you like me to go over some of them?
Yes, please.
Okay, so for example, if a bilingual is using their second language, and while using their second language, they use words from their native language. Let's say they're speaking in English, and during English speech to another English speaker who does not speak their native language, let's say Spanish, if they use Spanish words, like for example, bueno, which means okay, or pero, which means but, or que, which means but, or other words from Spanish. That is one of the markers that either their proficiency in Spanish is higher than their proficiency in English, or it's a marker that their executive function, their cognitive control system is taxed so much that they are unable to inhibit competition from Spanish while they use English. So for example, right now I'm using English, but because I'm proficient in English, I'm not going to use Romanian words or Russian words or French words or any other words that I might know in other languages, because I realize that my audience speaks English and I'm proficient and I can use executive function and cognitive control to control my languages, to really facilitate focus on English and inhibit the other languages that I know. So if I use words from the other language, or if I use grammar from the other language. So for example, a bilingual may sometimes be using the second language and they sound like they speak in a broken way or incorrect grammar in their second language. Again, there are two reasons why that might be the case. One is either they're not as highly proficient in the second language, or the grammar of their first language influences their grammar of their second language. Because languages differ in, for example, word order or syntactic structure. There are many ways in which languages differ. And if when you're using the second language, you follow the rules of your native language, in syntax, in grammar, and phonology, that also suggests that either your proficiency in the second language is not as high, or that your cognitive control, your executive function is so overexerted that you are unable to inhibit your native language. So these are two examples. A third example may be directly saying, I don't understand the word. I don't know what that means. Like, please, I don't understand. That's a sign that the person is not as highly proficient in their second language as they are in their native language, or as the people around them might be. A fourth indicator is when their linguistic behavior is incongruent with their cognitive level or with their education level. So for example, someone who has low proficiency level may use very simple grammar, like present tense, or very simple short sentences, or they may use very high frequency words and not use more rare words. So basically, if they were to speak in their native, more proficient language, their sentence complexity would be higher. And you can analyze someone's speech and make inferences about their level of education. For example, in English and monolinguals, if you would analyze how an English speaker speaks or writes, you can make inferences about their education level by their how long the sentence is, what kind of words they use, how complex the grammar is. So if a bilingual uses very different complexity levels across their two languages, that's a sign that they're not as proficient in their second language. Someone who assesses bilinguals frequently would know exactly what to look for. If someone specifically does not understand or is unable to follow directions, if they are asking, for example, or being told, so a discussion that would go along the ways of, do you mind if, and the person says yes, a non-native English speaker might have a difficult time understanding if yes means I mind or I don't mind. So there are often idiosyncratic and more complex, nuanced things in the language that if you're not proficient, you don't understand. And of course, there are cultural influences as well.
Attorney Sean, you may want to ask a question.
So,
Yes, I didn't want to interrupt the witness. So let me ask some more basic questions. Could you explain what executive function means? We're not talking like the President of the United States. So could you explain in your science, what are we talking about when we say executive function?
yes, executive function is a set of cognitive abilities that's usually controlled by the frontal lobes, by the frontal area of the brain, the most evolutionarily recently developed area of the brain that includes things like attention, inhibition, facilitation, decision-making, so higher order cognitive processes. Being able to pay attention to what matters and ignore what doesn't matter. Like right now, everyone here is paying attention to what is happening and has to be able to ignore thoughts about, what they had for breakfast, what they will have for lunch. This is an example of inhibitory control. You're inhibiting competing thoughts. So executive function is something that everyone uses, monolinguals, every person, we all use executive function at all times, pretty much. Like when we are driving, we have to focus on what matters and inhibit what doesn't matter. When you are bilingual, you have to focus on a language and inhibit your other languages.
I'm going to ask you a different question. Have you ever testified in court before?
No.
Let me try and break this up a little bit. What part of when a person is considered bilingual, can they engage in what I would call social conversation on what would be a normal level and still have difficulty with higher, more complicated conversational tasks?
Yes, you can have conversational proficiency and be able to understand the gist of a statement and be able to respond, but you're not able to function in a more complex linguistic environment.
Now, I understand, according to your curriculum detail, you also did some work in actually mapping the brain by having people that were bilingual doing communication. Is that right?
Yes.
Does the brain work differently when you are speaking, when a person is speaking in their non-native language?
In some ways, yes.
Could you explain in terms that we non-scientists, so I'm not asking for a biological, but just explain how that works so that we can understand.
Yes. So most people think that when you don't use a language, you switch it off. So you switch one on, you use it, you switch it off, and you go back and forth. That's not how the brain works. All languages are being co-activated in parallel, but to different degrees. So your brain has to inhibit competing languages. Right now, even though I'm speaking English, if you know any other languages, they are not completely turned off. They run in the background to some extent. And there is evidence for that from eye movements, from brain imaging, from even mistakes that people make when a language, a word pops out. So your brain has to constantly juggle multiple languages.
Does the brain work through a process in what I'll call it translation? I don't know if that's the correct word, but from taking the input in one language, in let's say English, as not the native language, before how the brain processes input in English to a non-native English speaker.
Translation is used usually during low proficiency stages as you learn another language. When you're not yet proficient, you go through your native language, but as your proficiency increases, you build direct connections from your second language to the meaning and representation.
So it actually alters the brain in some function, in some way?
In some ways, yes.
Does speaking in a non-native language require any more brain power than if you're speaking to someone in their native language? Both people are in their native language.
Yes.
Could you explain a little bit about how that works? What is happening, in other words?
Sure. So I think I could use an analogy. If you look at a duck gliding on the water and she looks very calm, she's just sort of beautifully gliding, but underneath she's pedaling very fast. This is sort of what a bilingual and multilingual brain does. It seems like it's functioning just like a person who speaks one language, but in reality, it's constantly juggling multiple languages, inhibiting one, facilitating the other, mapping sometimes if it's low proficiency, going through the native language. So I don't know how, I think, is that enough? Do you want me to say more?
I think that's good, and I'll ask another question.
This will be a gold mine of local intel.
Tell us about this corn festival.
Oh, you got your corn pudding.
So is it safe around here?
Sometimes.
No eyebrows?
Think of how light it'll feel in the summer. We gotta run. 11,000 more neighborhoods to go.
Ding dong.
Homes.com.
CrowdStrike Endpoint Security.
Use of the extra brain function to do that conversion that we were just talking about, whether it's the duck going fast underwater so that you could fly smoothly, does that require a person to use extra energy? Does it expend energy?
Sure. Any cognitive task, it expends energy.
Can it affect the person's overall attention span and level of concentration after a period of time?
Yes. I think one way to potentially explain it to someone who has never studied another language or speaks another language is to use other examples of symbolic systems. May I explain
Yes,
that?
please.
So
Give us an example.
in essence, a language is a symbolic system. It uses words as symbols to encode, transmit, and decode information over time, across time and space. There are other symbolic systems like music or math. Math is a language, for example. So when you learn math, when you learn music, when you learn another language, it changes how your brain works. So if you are monolingual, you can imagine yourself, for example,
Excuse me, I'm interrupting.
doing a
You say
math problem.
monolingual?
Monolingual,
Only
who
speak
one
one
language.
Okay.
But if you are engaged in doing a math problem, solving, let's say you're doing a calculus problem, you are basically, your brain is engaged in another symbolic system, which is what a bilingual does. And if while you're solving a math problem, other things happen on the side, people are telling you, hey, can you buy this list of things at the store? What's the list of things you bought at the store? You have fewer resources available, and you won't be functioning in the same way as if you're not solving a math problem or writing down musical notation at the same time. That's the closest to explain to someone what it can be like for bilingual, especially not a highly proficient bilingual who really has to concentrate to understand another language.
Does those, you just mentioned something like a distraction, like being told, hey, what do you want at the store? You're going to get something at the store. Do those distractions interfere with that executive function that's concentrating on the language?
It depends if you switch your attention to it.
And are there other stimuli besides somebody interrupting you that also affect that that concentration?
Yes.
What are some of the examples?
well, attention is not an unlimited resource. You can pay attention to one thing, several things, but you cannot pay attention to everything all the time. So you have to choose what you pay attention to and then shift your attention.
Well, for example, does fatigue have an effect on that kind of enhanced executive function that
Yes.
applies during the translation or the change of language process?
Yes.
And
Any,
what way?
any cognitively demanding task, if you do it for long enough, you expend energy and you will get tired. And if you're a low proficiency person who has to work really hard to decode, to understand and produce language in a language you're not as highly proficient in, that will have an impact.
I just want to make sure that everybody understands. When you're talking about proficiency, what are we talking about? How high functioning a person is in a non-native language? What does that mean, proficiency? Just to be clear in your science.
We're not talking about cognitive abilities or intelligence or ability to think. We're talking about your language abilities. So if you can be very smart but have low proficiency in another language, and then you are unable to understand or produce language in the same way. So one way someone may think about this criterion is, would you choose this person, any person, would you choose a bilingual to represent you in that second language? Is their language ability high enough to meet your needs in whatever setting, business setting or professional setting or any setting? Would you trust that this person's language abilities in that language are high enough? For example, you may have studied Spanish or Japanese or whatever language, and you may be very smart, but if you need to do business in that country, is that person language ability high enough to represent your interests, to sign documents? So that's.
Does that matter whether a person has a high school or college degree or does not have an advanced degree, or is that the same whether the person has more degrees or not?
Language level of education is not necessarily linked to language proficiency. There are highly educated people who don't speak another language, and there are people who never went to college or finished high school who speak multiple languages.
Are you familiar with the term disfluency?
Yes.
Could you explain to the jury what disfluency is?
Disfluency is a very frequently used term in communication sciences and disorders that I just use a disfluency as an example of a disfluency. At one extreme, you have individuals who are highly disfluent, who are diagnosed as having stuttering. One of the hallmarks of stuttering is being disfluent, often having disfluent speech, but it's a continuum. People who don't have, who do not have a stuttering language disorder may still have disfluencies when they're thinking about something. Low proficiency is frequently associated with disfluencies. People who have a low proficiency in the other language have higher instances of disfluences. In fact, disfluences in the other language are a hallmark of proficiency. If you look at someone who is speaking in another language, if they are frequently saying, pausing, that's a sign they're disfluent in the other language. They're not as highly proficient. They have to think harder to process in the other language. And universities teach courses, so communication sciences and disorders, we teach courses on disfluencies. It's an entire area of research.
Now, as part of the consultation that you and I had in this case, did I ask you to review certain materials connected to the case of Michelle Troconis?
Yes.
Now, just to be clear, before today, had you ever met Michelle Troconis?
No.
Did you ever talk to her before today?
No.
And when you spoke to her just now, did I introduce you to her in the hallway?
Yes.
So how much was the total amount of time that you were in her presence? When I say in her presence, directly next to her, talking with her?
Under 5 minutes.
Can you tell the jury what it is you reviewed in connection with this case?
I read all the transcripts and of the transcripts that you made available to me of the interviews, and I viewed the recordings of the interviews.
The what?
The recordings.
And when you say the recordings, can you just tell the jury which recordings that you reviewed?
I believe there were 3 interviews.
Would they be from June 2nd, 2019, June 6th, 2019, and August 13th, 2019?
I do not recall the dates, but I would assume so because there are only 3, as far as I know, only 3 interviews.
The jury has seen those videos, so I'm just going to ask you, did you watch all the hours of them?
Yes.
And what was your understanding of the setting, or settings plural, where these videos took place, if you recall?
What do you mean by setting?
Where it was taking place? Let's start with the first one on June 2nd, 2019.
In a room?
Do you recall whether it was, when you say a room, where that room was? You don't, or did
No,
I not?
I don't know where the room was. I was really focused primarily on the language and the speech that the people were using.
And just so that I'm clear, I didn't tell you to concentrate on the location
No.
or anything like that in terms of your reviewing these materials.
I was approaching it from my areas of expertise, which is language and language and memory.
Did you make note of the approximate length of each of those interviews?
They were several hours each.
In reviewing those, in reviewing all of those videos, did you see Mr. Troconis in those videos speaking?
Yes,
And from the review of those videos, were you able to make a determination of level of proficiency from your scientific point of view as you've explained it to the jury?
yes.
Okay, would you indicate to them what your opinion is with regard to
I would evaluate as having conversational English at about medium proficiency.
that? And that's is there a scale or is it just high, medium, and low?
I'm just using high, medium, and low, but one could give her a standardized test, for example, and see exactly where she falls on that. But I have given thousands of those tests over the past 30 years, so I'm confident she would fall somewhere in the middle.
Incidentally, I didn't ask you, I asked you where you worked, but I didn't ask you when you began as a professor at Northwestern University.
2000.
And you've been in this field doing the same type of work since 2000?
My first conference presentations were in 94.
94.
94. One was on language and one was on bilingualism.
But in terms of your current interest and your current specialty, that's been since
90, I've been studying bilingual since 92. First research presentation, 94. I started in college, then master's and PhD.
But in terms of your appointment as a professor,
Since 2000.
2000. Could you explain to the jury that what is your conclusion based on that Michelle Troconis in 2019 had a mid-level proficiency in English?
Can you clarify the question?
Yes, you
please?
said that her proficiency level was medium.
Yes,
Could you explain what criteria you used to make that determination?
sure. I looked for some of the things I mentioned before. Intrusions of Spanish words, multiple instances of Spanish words being used while she was speaking English to native English speakers, Spanish grammar while speaking English, and incorrect English grammar, specifically asking what a word meant, complexity level of her speech in English being of a low proficiency, and uncertain about how to follow some direction sometimes.
In your experience and in your field, would a person with mid or medium proficiency in English as a second language have any, just in general, in your opinion, have difficulty with certain kind of cognitive skills such as recall, expression, understanding in that foreign language?
It is not a given that someone will have difficulties, but it is depending on how proficient they are. They may not understand some words, they may not understand some tenses. There is an opportunity for miscommunication. And the lower the proficiency, the more opportunities for miscommunication and misunderstandings and misspeaking as well.
In your experience, a person with medium proficiency in English as a second language, are there certain clues regarding English grammar that you consider and make note of?
Are you asking me if the use of English grammar can give clues of proficiency?
Yes. Could you explain to the jury what clues you noticed in the review of these videos
Well, so
regarding the level?
things like word order, noun-verb agreement, case agreement, inability to use some of the various tenses in English. English has a tense system. I would say I could have done or I would have gone had I known. When you have a low proficiency in another language, you tend to go for basic present tense or infinitives and say things like I go there or I do that. So you don't use as many tense, you just really go with noun and present tense. So now very simple syntactic structure.
And just so we're clear, do you know how many tenses there are for verbs in the English
I
language?
don't want to misspeak in case a linguist who specializes on grammar will disagree, because there's always, you can be very pedantic and say, well, you didn't count that tense, you didn't count this. But English does have a lot of complicated tenses. When you learn English, it can be difficult for English speakers to get the nuance of some of those tenses.
So for those of us who maybe haven't been in high school English for a few years, there's such tense, there's the past tense, is that one?
Yes,
Future tense,
yes,
there's the progressive tense,
yes.
and,
Past perfect, future, there's so many.
okay.
Yeah.
And you said a person with low proficiency, or did you say lower proficiency?
Lower proficiency.
And just have a few minutes here, a few seconds here. Could you explain, is there a difference between what's known as episodic memory and semantic memory?
Yes,
Could you first of all explain the difference, what those two are and how they're different?
yes. Semantic memory is memory about general information. Things like what's the capital of a country, who's the president. So just general knowledge about the world. And then episodic memory is memory about experiences, specific events, maybe autobiographical memory, something that someone has done or lived through, what happened to them. That's an example of episodic memory. What you had for breakfast, what you saw, where you're going, that's episodic memory. How many states are in the United States? What was the first president? What was the last state to become a state? Those are semantic memories.
Does bilingualism and having a lower than high proficiency in the second language affect episodic memory?
Yes,
And have you actually studied and researched this area?
yes.
Could you just explain to the jury what your findings have been in general on that subject?
So bilinguals can encode memories. Events can happen to them while they speak different languages. And they can retrieve memories in different languages as well. You can be speaking one language or another when you retrieve a memory. So for example, one set of studies we have done finds that if you use the same language when you remember something as when you experience that event, your memory is improved. So if you speak Spanish when you are doing something, that memory is more likely to come to mind when you speak Spanish again. It's not that different for monolinguals if they find themselves in the same environment again. So if you go and visit your childhood home, suddenly you're flooded with all these memories that you haven't thought about for a long time because you've reinstated the same context. In the same way, when you reinstate the same language, it benefits your memory.
Does that play a role when you're asked to retrieve or recite something that you had encoded in your memory?
It can.
Is it the same whether a person is asked to recite a past recollection in their native language or in their less proficient second language?
Is what the same?
In terms of being able to recall accurately?
So we have found in multiple experiments at this point that people can actually give you different answers depending on the language you ask them. The exact same question can yield different answers because different things come to mind. Language is like a framework. It's tied to culture, it's tied to your experiences, and different things come to the forefront when you use one language or the other. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Are there other outside stimuli that also can affect recollection and communication, such as, for example, specific words that are used by a question?
Yes. So some in the science of memory believe that memories are never really lost, but they're just not accessed. So you can, if you use just the right word or the right hook, the right cue, you could get to some of those memories. Now, we don't know if no memories are ever lost, but we do know that the cue you use to access a memory can help. You may not remember something, and just the right word can help you access a memory. It's not only in the bilinguals case, although for bilinguals, this drastic difference between languages makes it more salient. But for monolinguals as well, you may not remember something, but then if a question is asked just a certain way with just the right word, you suddenly remember it. Sometimes, so another cue may be, for example, olfactory. If you smell a certain smell, it can bring to the forefront memories that you haven't remembered before. So memory is an interesting thing. If you use the right cue and the right word and the right, sometimes, word or syntactic structure, it can bring a memory out. And so there is this, in neuroscience, there is this expression, the neurons that fire together, wire together. So if you've experienced something in a certain way, those neural patterns, once you recreate them, you're more likely to remember things again.
Would that be true, and would it affect recall if the words that are used on different occasions by the questioners are different? They alter the way it's asked.
They could.
And could it then lead to a different response?
It could.
You just have a moment. Oh, I do have a couple other questions, but you had indicated at the beginning that I believe you said that one's cultural background does play a role in development of language proficiency. Is that true?
Yes.
Could you just explain very briefly what that role plays?
Well, culture and language are very tightly connected. It's very difficult to separate the two. Language is usually a vehicle for culture. So cultural influences cultural influences shape the way we talk.
When I mean culture, if somebody grows up in a foreign country where it's not an English-speaking country, or someone grows up in the United States speaking a second language for, making that their first language, would there also, in some circumstances, be a difference in how they would respond and communicate a response?
Yes, and not all Spanish speakers share the same culture. There are many countries around the world that speak Spanish, and those cultures differ. In the United States, speakers of Spanish, heritage speakers, so maybe they grew up in families that speak Spanish. They may be more reflecting American culture than the native Spanish-speaking culture. So, yes.
And I'm going to ask, at my request, last week while you were in Denver, did you prepare and sign a report concerning your studies?
Yes.
Can I approach? Showing you what has been marked as AAA. Is this the document that was prepared and signed?
Yes.
And that was on February 16th,
Yes.
so last week,
Yes. Last Friday.
while you were in Colorado for your conference,
Yes.
for your words presentation?
Yes.
Oh, and you only when did you sign that?
Yesterday, last night.
No objection.
So AAA admitted as full.
And just a quick question regarding that. If you'd had more time, would your report have been more expansive and more explanatory?
I would like to say yes, but then there is also the famous Mark Twain quote, if I had more time, my letter would have been shorter. The more time you have, the more you can focus on just the right thing. So
Thank you very much. I have no further questions, Doctor.
Good morning, doctor. How are you?
good morning.
I have some questions for you. By the way, we just met earlier. I introduced myself. My name is Michelle Manning. I represent the state in this matter. Okay.
Good to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too. So I'm just going to start asking you some questions, primarily about your CV. I think it's in evidence. If you need to take a look at it, just let me know. I'll go get it for
Sure.
you. It's 63 pages. Right?
I have not counted. Okay.
Okay. And you have been affiliated with Northwestern University since the year 2000. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. And as I understand from your resume, a lot of what you do at Northwestern is conduct research in the area of linguistics.
Research in the area of psychology of language. I'm not a linguist.
Okay, psychology, and please correct me if I say the wrong term. You have a specialty in linguistics, but you practice in psychology.
I'm a cognitive scientist.
Okay. And as a part of your academic career is primarily research.
Yes.
And you've done a lot of research in the areas of bilingualism, and I think you also said multilingualism.
Yes.
And you've been able to do this in part from large grants from private foundations and the government as well, correct?
Yes.
In fact, you were just awarded a $3.5 million grant from the federal government.
Yes.
And you conduct that research solely within the confines of Northwestern University, correct?
Yes.
You would agree, doctor, that research is extensive work
Yes.
and it takes a lot of planning.
Yes.
And you've written numerous reports and articles about all the research and work that you've done over the years.
Yes.
I think you talked about over 200 writings, whether between articles, chapters, publications. Is that correct? Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Would it be safe to say, and would you agree with the statement, that in about the 200 writings and opinions that you authored, those reports, those articles are multiple pages? They're in depth.
Yes.
And would you, part of those research, part of those writings, you would indicate would result in a conclusion or an opinion?
Yes.
And the rest of that writing would explain how you got that conclusion and that opinion.
Yes.
Okay, and that's how you conduct your over 200 writings.
Not all of those are empirical studies. So some are empirical studies and some are opinion pieces, for example.
And
or
some are,
reviews.
okay. And you give in the opinion pieces, you give your opinion and you explain why.
Yes.
And you've done this for all the articles that you've written over the years. We're going back to 2000, maybe even, I think you have one from 1998, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And now, when did Attorney Schoenhorn first contact you about testifying for the defense in this case?
Winter, beginning of 2021. Not about testifying at that time, but consulting.
Okay. And you signed the engagement agreement in February of 2021?
Yes.
It was about 3 years ago?
Yes.
And you're charging him about $600 an hour for consulting with him?
Yes.
Do you get more money for testifying?
Not that I know of, no.
It's just a flat $600 every hour?
Yes.
And how many times have you met with the defense attorneys, both in person and on the phone?
I've met with him in person once last night in the hotel lobby in preparation for this. And I've met with him on the phone twice this year and probably maybe 2 or 3 times back in 2021.
And you flew in here from Northwestern last night,
Yes,
and the defense is paying for your flight?
yes.
At what point was the decision made that you would actually testify in this case?
Sometimes earlier this year, I believe, when the case went to trial.
And you filed a report that we just saw that's into evidence?
The attorney filed it.
Yes. Did you bill Attorney Schoenhorn for writing that report?
Not yet. I haven't billed anything beyond the retainer at this point.
How long did it take you to write that report?
I did not write the report. Because I was in between meetings, I dictated it over the phone while I was in the car from one event to another, and then I checked it. I read it and approved it on the way back from from attending the American Association for the Advancement of Science in Denver, going to a book reading an event at a bookstore in Littleton, and then coming back.
Okay, so you dictated it on the phone while you were en route? Were you in the
Yes.
car?
I was in a Uber or Lyft or something like a ride share.
Okay, so you, in your car ride while you were dictating the report that was submitted as evidence today, did you have notes in front of you?
No,
Okay. Did you have any of the interviews in front of you?
no,
Did you have anything in front of you that you referred to while you were
No,
dictating the report?
no. The request for the report came while I was at the conference very last minute and Friday afternoon. It was due Friday evening, and I was fully scheduled. Every hour was scheduled at that point.
Who did you dictate the report to?
Attorney Schoenhorn.
Okay, so you were on the phone in a car, in an Uber, dictating a report to Attorney Schoenhorn. So you didn't actually type that report.
Correct.
The defense attorney did.
Correct.
And when did you get an opportunity to read it?
On the way back.
Which would be about how many hours later?
One could probably check my phone records, but let's say 5 hours later, 4 hours later.
Okay, so around what time was it that you were dictating the report to Attorney Schoenhorn to write?
In the afternoon.
In the afternoon?
My book reading event, I think, was probably 5:30. So sometimes between 4 and 5:30, I was dictating it. And then on the way back later in the evening, I think it was due at midnight Eastern time, which is 10 o'clock Mountain Time in Denver. So it was at some point before 10.
That you were able to read it?
Yes.
And then you said, yes, that's exactly what I
Yes,
approved.
I said, mhm,
Okay, but you weren't the one who actually sat there and typed it.
correct,
The defense attorney did.
correct.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know who typed it, but I provided the text and then I read it and approved it.
Okay, and by dictating, you were on the phone with him?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm object, asked and answered 3 times now.
Well, questions have been, it was dictated, that was a response. The office of Attorney Schoenhorn typed it up, that was a response. And that ground has been plowed. Sustained.
Now, the purpose of submitting that report was to provide notice of what you were going to testify to here today, right?
I'm going to object, Your Honor. The court knows that the reason.
Well, the objection is
Lack of foundation and necessary
for
knowledge.
foundation. Sustained.
Dr. Marion, and all those reports and articles that are, I guess I'll just call them writings, the 200 writings that you've completed in your career. Have you ever gone to or presented on those topics on any of those writings that were 1 page?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Sure, that was probably a confusing question. I apologize. You've done many presentations as well. That's part of your resume.
Yes,
And you've done many speaking engagements.
yes.
And I think you talked on direct about conferences that you presented at. Any of those conferences, speaking engagements, presentations, and were they done based solely off of a 1-page report?
Most conference submissions are based on abstracts. Some of those abstracts are half a page, 1 page. They can vary from 50 words to several hundred words. But usually when you submit to a conference, you submit an abstract, half a page.
Now, your report, the first sentence of that report reads, "This report is provided as a general overview of the subject matter upon which I can offer a professional opinion." Where in your report, Dr. Marion, does it talk about your evaluation of the defendant's proficiency?
I believe proficiency is mentioned in the report.
I believe my question was, where in your report does it state your evaluation of Michelle Troconis's proficiency in English?
The court heard her answer. She doesn't mention that in her report. Perhaps the court did not hear her answer correctly.
She indicated, Your Honor, that proficiency is mentioned in the report, but that was not the state's question. So I'm just trying to clarify if I may.
It is not mentioned.
And your evaluation and the process you use, you discussed that on direct about her proficiency and the factors you consider. You testified to that in direct. Do you recall testifying to all that?
Yes.
You didn't put any of that in your report.
My understanding is that my report and my testimony is aimed at talking about bilinguals in general, how you evaluate proficiency in bilinguals in general, not about this particular person or this particular case, which is what I've tried to do. I've tried to speak to how do you evaluate proficiency in a bilingual second language.
So your testimony under direct examination by Attorney Schohorn about Michelle Troconis having a medium level of proficiency, you didn't mean that?
I answered the question that I was asked, but that was not what I put in the report because I was told that I would be testifying about bilingualism in general. So I put in the report my opinion on bilingualism in general. But then my understanding is that if I'm in court, I ought to answer the question that I'm asked.
Okay. You just weren't asked to write about it.
I was not.
Okay. Now, some of you called on direct the videos, you were discussing about the videos that you watched. Do you recall that?
Mhm.
You actually on direct called them recordings. Do you recall that testimony?
Possibly.
Okay. And you used the word recordings.
Yes.
And that was your term. Do you recall
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Okay. In your report, you called them interrogations.
Okay.
Okay. Do you recall writing or dictating that to Attorney Schohorn to write?
Interrogations is the word I usually use when I refer to those recordings.
Okay. And in that review, you watched those 3 recordings or interrogations.
Right.
And when did you watch them?
In 2021.
So in 2021, did you watch the June 2nd one?
I don't remember which ones I watched. I have not watched them since then.
Oh, okay. So since 2021, you haven't watched any of the 3.
No.
And so while you're writing or dictating your report in the car, you
Yes.
remembered the videos that you watched
I
from.
have been sent the transcripts last week as well, so I had read the transcripts.
Okay. So you had read the transcripts of the interview. When did you read those?
Last week.
Was that before writing your report?
Yes.
And did you have those transcripts in front of you when you
Yes, I
dictated
had
your
them on my
report?
phone, in my email. I was not looking at them at the time, but I had read them.
Now, you were also told certain things about Michelle Troconis. That's in your report. I'll start there. Correct?
Yes.
When were you told that Michelle Troconis is a native language, her native language is Spanish?
When I was first contacted in 2021,
And who told you that?
Attorney Schoenhorn.
And you were also told that she spent most of her formative life in South America. Is that correct?
Correct.
And who told you that?
Attorney Schoenhorn.
When did he tell you that?
When we first, in 2021.
You were also told that she had a family of Spanish speakers. Do you recall that?
Yes.
When were you told that?
At the same time that she's a native Spanish speaker who grew up in South America and all that information when I first learned about the person.
Which would be 2021?
Yes.
And who told you that?
Attorney Schoenhorn.
Were you told them prior to watching all 3 of the interviews?
Yes.
At any point, did you interview Michelle Troconis yourself during that time period?
No. I spoke with her today for the first time.
For the first time. And I think you testified about that on direct. You indicated that you met her about under 5 minutes.
Yes.
And that was this morning.
Yes.
For the past 3 years, you never asked to meet her.
No.
Okay. And you, even when you learned you were going to be flying up here to Connecticut to testify about her proficiency, you didn't ask to meet her.
No.
Okay. What about talking to her on the phone?
No.
You also talked a little bit about, I want to ask you some questions actually about proficiency.
Well, before we do that, we'll take our morning recess and resume at 11:35. Please do not discuss the case, ladies and gentlemen. Bring the jury on. Would council stipulate, please?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
May I, Your Honor? Good morning still, Doctor. Just a couple more questions, okay? I think we left off right before the break with proficiency. And we talked a lot on direct about somebody's proficiency in English or a second language. And so bilingual means 2 languages, multilingual means, if you could just explain that again?
Multilingual would mean more than 2, but bilingual is part of more than 1. A multilingual is someone who speaks more than 1 language.
And monolingual will be 1 language.
Yes.
Okay. So the proficiency of Michelle Troconis, you determined based on watching solely the interviews.
Up until this conversation today, I was not evaluating Michelle Troconis' proficiency. I was thinking about proficiency in general terms in bilinguals.
Okay. If you also talked about a proficiency test you've done thousands of times.
There are many tests of proficiency, depending on whether you're looking at vocabulary size, grammar, various things.
And you've performed those proficiency tests on other people at other
Yes.
times throughout the course
Yes.
of your academic career.
Yes.
You would agree that that would give you a scientific answer or a reliable answer?
Not more reliable than my assessment.
Okay. And that assessment is based off of the 3 interviews you watched in 2019?
Even based on of Michelle Troconis specifically?
Yes.
Are you talking about assessment of Michelle Troconis' proficiency?
Well, let me ask you this, Doctor, and I apologize if I'm not phrasing it correctly. You indicated on direct that you determined, based on the interviews, Michelle Troconis' proficiency in English at a medium level.
Yes.
Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
And that was solely based on the interviews as well as the information you received in 2021 from Attorney Schohorn.
It was based on transcripts, videos, and I mean, today, my conversation with her today would also confirm that.
But that's your conversation today in 2024.
Today,
Okay, in her level, you would agree with the statement that somebody's level of proficiency in a language may change over time?
of course.
Okay, so if I can direct your attention solely to 2019, did you speak to Michelle Troconis in 2019?
No,
Okay, so your evaluation of her proficiency level at a medium, would that be currently, now, or back in 2019?
both.
Both, okay. And you didn't do a proficiency test on Michelle Troconis,
No.
correct? Even today?
No,
Okay. And the last time you watched those recordings was about 3 years ago. Was that your testimony?
parts of those recordings were shown in court, I think, and they're available online as well. So this week I have watched some of the things that are online just casually.
Okay, you're talking about, well, I should say, there's a camera behind me.
Yes,
We're currently being live streamed. You understood
Yes.
that? You have been watching the trial?
part of it, yes.
Okay. Did you watch the testimony about the interviews?
Which day? I
Well-
can tell you exactly what I watched.
Sure.
I watched your interview of the pond person 2 days ago, and I watched Elizabeth Loftus's interview yesterday. Those were the primary things that I've watched.
Okay, and was that in preparation for you coming here to testify?
Yes, I guess, to get an idea of what this process is like.
Okay. It can be stressful testifying. You would agree with that?
Mhm.
Especially if you've never done that before?
I would.
And you've never done it.
I have never done it before.
And but you didn't watch Detective Kimball's testimony or about the interviews that were shown in court?
If I had seen pieces of other interviews, I'm not sure which person it was, and not too detailed. I wouldn't be able to say who it was and what it was about.
Okay, but you did watch some of the interviews as well that was shown.
So I would watch them in between meetings or while I was flying. So whatever happened to be on, right, not systematically.
Okay, and you, I just want to go back a little bit to the evaluation of proficiency. Now, you indicated on direct, you look at certain factors,
Mhm.
such as somebody's age. I think you mentioned on direct that one of the factors is an individual's age. Do you
Those
recall
are variables
testifying?
that are taken into account.
Yep.
Yes.
And you indicated age was one of those variables.
yes.
How old is Michelle Troconis?
I believe I have not studied Michelle Troconis. I'm not an expert on Michelle Troconis.
Okay, so
I believe she's 49.
okay. And do you know, well, let me ask you this. If some of those factors about whether or not somebody could be considered proficient in a language, you would agree that if somebody understands a joke in English, that would be a factor that you may consider?
It depends on the complexity of the joke.
And you would agree if somebody understands their legal rights, that would be a factor that you would consider if somebody's proficient?
Yes,
And you would agree that if somebody corrects somebody's misstatement in English, that may be a factor that you would consider in determining somebody's proficiency.
it depends.
And you would also agree that being able to write in English might be a factor that you would consider?
Being able to write in English is not necessarily an indication of proficiency. It's an indication of literacy in English, but Spanish and English share the same alphabet. So you could be writing things without knowing what you're writing. In theory, I'm not talking about Michelle Troconis, I'm talking in general terms.
In general, okay. And how about a factor in proficiency being able to recite a writing word for word about a week later?
That's not, being able to recite something by heart is not an indicator of proficiency. You can learn things by heart in languages you do not understand.
And you would agree that if somebody can ask maybe appropriate questions in context, maybe a factor that would be considered.
Yes, that's why I was saying that she has functional conversational, a person who does that has functional conversational Spanish or English or another language.
And you would also agree that maybe a factor that would be if somebody can communicate with a loved one or a lived-in boyfriend in English, that might be a factor that you would consider.
No, I would disagree with that. For example, I attended a wedding in Hong Kong between an American man and Chinese woman. She did not speak Chinese. She did not speak English. They communicated via Google Translate. They spoke the language of love. So it's possible to be in a relationship with people whose language you do not speak, in theory.
In theory, okay. Let me ask you this series of questions I just asked you about different factors. Did you ask any of that of Michelle Troconis or Attorney Schoenhorn?
Any of what?
When would that be, Your Honor?
Sure,
Well,
I'll sharpen the question, Your Honor. Back in 2021, when you were asked to review the videos, you were told certain information, correct? You were told that she is Spanish speaking.
Yes.
I think we went through this. You were
Yes.
told she grew up in South America.
Yes.
We were also told that she understands jokes, that she
No.
speaks in context.
We did not discuss that in 2021. Nothing about understanding jokes or speaking, and no.
And I think you never asked, did you?
About understanding jokes?
Any of that?
I've asked I've asked the attorney about the language history and language proficiency extensively yesterday and also over the phone last week. And our conversation today with Mr. Troconis was entirely about this. At what age she learned English, when did she come to the States, where did she live? It was all about that.
Okay. But back in 2021, prior to watching the videos, you didn't ask him?
No.
Okay. And by the way, with respect to proficiency, how proficient in a second language do you need to be to lie?
I'm going to object, Your Honor.
Well, question is, how proficient would you need to be in a second language in order to lie? Well, language doesn't determine the ability to lie. To express a thought that is not true is more accurate. Language doesn't determine capacity to lie. So the court will allow you to pursue the line, but the question didn't seem to make sense.
Sure. Let me see if I could sharpen it a little bit. Somebody who can, I think you talked about the word conversation or
Mhm.
conversational language. Somebody who can speak conversational language in another language, say English.
Mhm.
Would they be able to lie in English?
Honesty and language are not related. You could, that's not, I would like to correct what I just said. There is research on honesty across languages. There's actually a very famous paper called Honesty Speaks a Second Language, which suggests that bilinguals are more likely to be more honest when they use their second language than their native language. It's done in a decision-making lab at the University of Chicago by Boaz Pfizer. And there are several studies that show that people are more likely to be honest when performing tasks in their second language.
And you talk about one of those studies on Direct, I believe, about recalling events in your native language, I guess, or events, episodic events or episodic memory, I think. Do you recall that line of questioning about being cued in a language?
Yes, those are two different lines of research.
Okay, well, let me
Recalling
ask you
things in
about,
episodic memory and honesty across languages are two different lines of research.
well, let me ask you about episodic memory recall, Doctor. Was it your testimony on Direct that a individual who is experiencing an event in one language is more likely to recall that event when questioned about it in that same language?
Correct.
Okay, and that's based on the studies that you have
Yes.
done.
multiple studies. I would qualify though that language of encoding can be both external, the language that you are speaking to me, and it can be internal. If there is no external input in the language, but the self-talk, or if I'm texting in the language, that's also language of encoding.
Okay, so that, like text, it could be different.
Yes.
Okay, that's understandable. So if somebody were committing a crime in English, they are more likely to recall it if they're asked about it in English. I'll backtrack. You're giving me a look. It probably was an awful question. If somebody has a memory of something, such as a crime
Mhm.
that they are committing, and that crime, the acts around it are performed in English, then they are asked about it in English. Again, the cued retrieval,
Yes.
same language as
Yes.
encoding. I think you
Yes.
testified to all this.
Yes.
Yes. They are more accurately going to recall.
They are more likely to remember things that happen in one language when the same language is used again.
Okay. I want to just ask you a little bit about.
None of that research has been done on criminal behavior
Okay.
or crimes.
And you don't have any experience in criminal law or criminal procedure, I'm asking. Okay. With respect to disfluency, I think you talked a little bit about on direct about that.
Yes.
Do you recall that line of
Yes.
questioning? Can being nervous about something cause disfluency?
There are multiple variables that cause disfluencies, and it varies across people what makes one person disfluent versus another.
Can lying be one of those?
It's interesting. So I'm not an expert on lying, but from what I remember from behavioral research on lying, when people lie, they actually tend to be overly ornate, provide too many details, extra details to make it sound credible. But that is not my area of expertise.
Okay. Now, just a couple more questions. On your report that you wrote, you cited one chapter in was that a book you used for your classes?
No, the chapter is just one of the chapters that I had co-written with a student at the time.
Okay. Was that a chapter that you dictated to Attorney Shohern in your?
I
in the book?
mentioned that one of the chapters on bilingualism, episodic memory. Mhm.
Okay. And the studies that you testified to on direct, you didn't add those to the report?
No,
Okay. That chapter you cited actually refers to a study by Dr. Elizabeth Loftus.
correct.
Okay. And are you aware that Dr. Loftus was retained by the defense to testify in this case as well?
Yes. But the chapter was written in 2014.
Yes.
10 years ago.
You've known her work?
Of course.
Okay. And were you aware that she testified yesterday
Yes.
and you watched her testimony?
Most of it. I was in transit, so whatever I could watch.
Okay. And did you speak to her about your testimony today?
I did not speak with her yesterday or today.
And just to be clear, you also have not spoken to Michelle Troconis in the entire time that you have been retained by the defense attorney, except for the 5 minutes this morning.
Correct.
I have nothing further. Thank you.
I just have a couple of questions for you, doctor. You were asked questions about the length of the report that you prepared as being only one page, exhibit AAA for today. When did you first find out that a report was needed to be prepared by last Friday? at
Last
midnight?
Friday afternoon while I was at the conference.
And were you made aware that the court had ordered that it had to be prepared by midnight of last Friday,
Correct. Yes.
Eastern time?
Yes.
Had you, if you had had more time, would you have anticipated making a more extensive report if you had been asked to do so prior to that?
Yes.
No further questions.
If I may, just you've had a week, correct?
Objection,
That's-
Your Honor. The court had given us like 6 hours, so that's 7 hours.
No. The court,
If I can clarify that, Your Honor, you filed that report last Friday, right?
Yes.
That's 7 days ago. So in the past 7 days, did you file a supplemental report?
I have never filed a report of any kind. I didn't know I would have to file a report. So Friday afternoon, while I'm at the conference, I'm being told we need to file a report within the next few hours. I didn't even know that I could file another report. That's
Okay.
not something that,
And
I was
counsel
not-
asked you if you would want to make it more in depth, and you indicated yes on direct.
if you need a more extensive report, I'm happy to prepare one.
Thank you. Nothing further.
No further questions.
Marion, you may step down.
Attorney Felsen is getting the next witness, Your Honor.
You could please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or solemnly and sincerely affirm, as the case may be, that the evidence you shall give concerning this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, or upon penalty of perjury? Please state your name and spell it for the record.
My name is Clara Duperron. And what else?
You could spell it.
CLARA D and Dice UP as in Peter ERRON.
Good morning, Ms. Dupron.
Good morning.
Do you go by any other name other than Clara Dupron?
Yes, my nickname is Petu, Petu.
Mr. Brown, can you tell the jury where you live?
I live in Canton, Connecticut,
How long have you lived there?
since 2012.
Before you lived in 2012, when you lived in Canton, where did you live?
I lived for 2 years in Simsbury, Connecticut, but before I'm originally from Argentina, from Buenos Aires.
Did you grow up in Argentina?
Yes,
Do you know Michelle Troconis?
yes.
Can you tell the jury how you know Michelle Troconis?
I met Michelle through a mutual friend that we had, that because I'm from Latin America and I have kids the same age as Michelle's daughter, so she thought that it would be a good fit for us to get together. And yes, we grew up with the same culture, so that is a very typical behavior when someone from Latin America comes. It's very common that you introduce to them because you share a lot of things with them.
You met her in 2017?
Yes,
All right, and did you become friends with Michelle in 2017?
yes,
Are you still friends with Michelle
Yes.
Troconis? And obviously you don't want anything bad to happen. You're concerned
Of
about
course.
her, right?
yes, of course.
But you're under oath
Yes,
and you understand you need to tell the truth?
totally.
Where was Michelle living in 2017?
She was living in Fort Jefferson Crossing in Farmington.
Do you know who Michelle was living with at Fort Jefferson Crossing?
Yeah, she was living with Fotis Dulos and the daughter, Nicole.
When did you meet Fotis Dulos?
First of all, I met Michelle, and then we became friends, and then she introduced me Fotis.
Did you also become friends? Did you consider Fotis Dulos a friend of yours?
Yes, was friend, yes.
In 2017 and 2018, did you socialize with both Michelle and Fotis?
Yes, was more with Michelle, but yes, we did movie nights, barbecues, Mother's Days together, that he was there. Yes, that typical things that you do with your friends, and when the partner is there, you socialize.
And did you and your daughter and Michelle and her daughter get together?
Yes.
Do you water ski?
Not water ski.
Did you ever go down to the pond with
Yes,
Michelle?
I went to the pond.
Had you ever met Fotis's children?
No, I never.
Did there come a time in around 2018? Did you ever learn that Fotis was unable to see his children at any point in time?
Yes, of course.
And when you were friends with Fotis, did you ever talk to him about his children?
Yes, a lot.
Did you ever talk to him about his inability to see his children?
Yes, we talked.
And did he ever express frustration to you? What were his emotions about that time, about not being able to see his children?
Yes, of course, was frustration because he was the father and he wanted to see the kids. So it's logical that he expressed frustration.
And around that time, around 2018, were you aware that there was a point in time where Michelle Troconis and her daughter were unable to be around Fotis's children as well when Fotis was with his children?
Yes.
Did Michelle ever express frustration to you about the conflict between
Yes, of
Fotis and
course. Yes.
she did?
Yes.
Did she ever use disparaging language when talking about Jennifer?
Excuse me, what is disparaging?
Did she ever say anything, swear words about Jennifer?
No,
Have you heard Michelle swear before?
no. Maybe in Spanish we have like little words that are not maybe the best words to use, but not huge words or strong words.
I'm going to go to around 2019 and about April or May. Did you ever learn that there was a custody report being prepared related to Fotis and his children?
Yes, I heard.
And who was it who shared that information with you?
Fotis.
And
Did you know whether or not, in fact, a custody report had been finalized?
Objection.
Well, asking this witness, do you know whether, if the question is, do you know whether the custody report was in its final draft? What's the relevance?
My next question, Your Honor, is going to be Fotis's reaction to it between April and May of 2019.
You can just ask the question.
Did Fotis react at all to any prepared custody report?
Sorry again.
Did you learn whether Fotis had actually seen a custody report and reviewed one?
He told that there was a report that came favorable to him.
And what was his reaction to that you observed?
Like, was a good reaction. He was going to have custody of the kids. That is what he told.
When you say custody of the kids, do you mean full custody or half and half custody? Did you have an understanding at the time?
Object, Your Honor.
Well, sustained.
About when was it that Fotis expressed happiness about?
Was in Greek Easter around that time. I was there in Greek Easter.
You were where?
In the house, in the celebration of the Greek Easter.
You were at Fort Jefferson?
Yes.
Do you know about when Greek Easter was?
I remember my son's birthday is April 26, so it was 28, something like that, at the end of April.
The end of April?
Yes.
Do you know who else was at that celebration?
Where all my kids was Michelle's part of family. A lot of kids were there. Were Fotis friends. Some I remember Mike Rose. I remember Pavel was there.
Do you know who Mike Rose is?
Yes, he's a lawyer.
When you say Michelle's family was there, do you mean Michelle's mother, father? Who do you mean?
Object, Your Honor.
Ground.
Relevance of who was present at Greek Easter.
Well, this is probably leading to another inquiry, so overruled.
And did you observe Fotis's, just to ask Michelle's family, can you tell the jury who was actually present at that dinner?
It was Marisela, the mother, Marisela, the daughter. It was the husband of Marisela, the daughter, the father, nephews, and nephews.
And Fotis was there and happy and celebrating?
Yes.
Have you been over to Fort Jefferson on many occasions between 2017 and 2019?
Yes.
Would you go over by yourself sometimes?
Yes.
And have you been there with other friends as well?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the house? You've been inside the house on several occasions?
Yes, mostly the first floor, because we never went to sometimes to the upper place sometimes, but yes, I'm familiar with the house.
Have you been in the living room?
Yes,
May I approach
a
you?
lot.
Yes.
I'm showing it's been marked as exhibit BBB.
Yes, this is the living room.
Do you recognize that picture?
Yes, yes.
Can you tell the jury what that's a picture of?
Well, this is the living room. There is like a second area of relaxing place, if you can say that. There is a fireplace, there is a TV, and from there you could go outside, the door to the porch.
And is that a fair and accurate depiction of what the living room looked like
Yes,
at Fort Jefferson?
yes.
I asked that to be admitted.
Did you show it to counsel?
I did have a copy.
No objection.
What is that, BBB?
It is.
Triple B admitted as full.
I don't think this is on me. I just show it to the jury briefly. Was the fireplace being used when you went over sometimes?
Yes.
Was there a grate in front of the fireplace?
What is
Like a protective barrier in
Yes,
front of the
yes,
fireplace?
yes.
Was that always there?
Yes.
And did you go to Fort Jefferson every season? Did you go in the winter?
Yes,
in
I
the
went
spring?
all the season.
Were there certain times when the fireplace was not going?
Yes,
But was that dependent on the season or was it just going sometimes and sometimes it wasn't?
no, depends more, not on the season, more on the weather maybe. And also it was a relaxing moment. Like maybe it's not to hit the house, but it's like a good moment to share with someone or drinking wine or tea, that something like that.
Would there sometimes be a fire going on when it was still warm outside?
Yes,
Did they also have a fireplace outside, like an outside?
yes,
fire
a fire pit.
And was that going a lot,
Yes,
all seasons?
yes, yes.
I'm gonna bring you now to May 24th, 2019.
Yeah.
Were you at Fort Jefferson at any point in time on May 24th,
No.
2019?
No.
So you don't know whether Michelle had a fire going at any point in time?
No, I don't, have no idea.
And you don't know if she left the house and,
No.
and hadn't?
Object, Your Honor. Objection.
Right.
She asked and answered. She clearly said she wasn't there that day.
Well, the court does not know what the second question was, so court does understand. She indicated that she was not there on that day. She does not know whether there was a fire in the fireplace that day. So that's overruled. The next question.
Thank you. I can ask a couple of foundational questions. Even though you weren't at Fort Jefferson, were you on the phone with Michelle Troconis at multiple times during the day?
Yes,
And do you know whether Michelle left the house before closing off a fire?
Objection. Calls
Well,
for hearsay.
well, the question now is, did you talk to Michelle Troconis on the phone about fire in the fireplace? Because witnesses already said she wasn't there on that day.
So you don't know?
no.
Your Honor, if I may get a ruling on the objection.
Overruled.
Thank you.
So you don't know?
No, I don't.
Did you see Michelle Troconis on May 24th, 2019?
Yes,
When is the first time that you spoke to Michelle on May 24th?
I spoke during the morning because that day I told her if she can come to my store. I had a store in Simsbury, a decoration store, and she was my provider of rugs. So I called her and said, can we meet? Because that day I was going to travel to London and I wanted to pay her some rugs that I owed her. So I said, please come between 10, between 10, 24, 45, I don't remember exactly the time, but I said I will be in a very short gap of time because I have to do all my stuff for the trip. And so we met in my store around 11. I don't remember exactly, 10:45, 11, and we were doing that, the accounting of the rugs. We were saying goodbye. My business partner was there too. Was painting in the basement, and that's it. At some point, she said, "Take pictures in London." Yes, goodbye, and that was my interaction in the store.
Other than you said that Michelle was there, was anybody with Michelle? Did she go to the store with anybody?
No, she came alone.
And other than your partner at the store, you and Michelle, was anybody else there at the time?
No,
How did Michelle seem when she was at the store with you that morning?
she was every single day that she came to my store. She sat down in front of my desk. We were working both with the numbers. And do you want cash? Do you want a check? I prefer a check. So that was the interaction. Like every single day, she used to come a lot to my store.
Do you remember if while she was at your store, if she was on the phone or using the phone?
No, I don't recall.
Do you recall what time she left your store?
Yes, it was not more than 45 minutes when she arrived, so it was not like 12, it could be.
Was Michelle in a rush at all?
Excuse me?
Was she in a rush
No, it was me that I was in a rush.
because you were leaving
Yeah.
for a vacation? Did you communicate at all with Michelle at any other point in time during the day?
Yes, a lot of times.
Can you tell the jury about those communications?
In one moment, I took an Uber to go to Boston, and the Uber driver stopped to put oil to the car and make some stuff with the car, and I texted her and said, this guy, like, he could do this in another time. He's dropping me off in Boston and he had to do so. It was like a funny conversation. And then I remember finally I'm heading the airport. When I was in customs, I remember that we exchanged, like, I'm in customs, I can talk right now. And then I remember once I was in the gate that I told her, now finally I'm in the gate. That was around 7 and the flight was going to be 8:30, I think. I don't remember exactly, but it was, I remember exactly that moment that I was in front of the gate.
So from 2017 to that conversation in
Yes.
May of 2019, you had been friends with Michelle?
Yes.
And you had talked to her regularly?
Yes.
Did she tell you at any point that she was on Albany Avenue with Fotis?
Objection.
Brown.
A call for hearsay.
If it were a statement offered by a party against the party. But this isn't being offered by the party against the party. So it could fall under statement by a party in the course of an in furtherance of the conspiracy. Court can overrule the objection.
You can answer that.
Can you repeat the question?
Did Michelle ever say she was on Albany Avenue with
No.
Fotis, or cleaning Edie Mountain?
No,
While you were talking to her and texting with her, did she seem upset?
nothing.
And you had talked to her many times before in the preceding months
Yes.
and years? Did you leave for London then that night?
Yes.
When's the next time that you recall talking to Michelle?
Monday, it was, yes, on Monday.
And did Michelle seem upset on the phone when she called you on Monday?
Object, Your Honor.
Did Michelle seem upset when she called you that day? Ground.
It calls for hearsay and relevance at this point as to the Monday after.
Well, the question is, did she seem upset on the 28th, correct? Is
Yes,
that the
Your Honor.
question? May
Yes, Your
28th, overruled.
She was worried.
Do you know what she was worried about?
Yes, because she told me that Jennifer
I'd
disappeared.
object, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Yes, that, okay, I will answer again. Yes, she was worried because Jennifer disappeared.
At some point, did you come back from London?
Yes.
Obviously you did. When did you come back?
I came back the same week on Thursday night, late in the night,
When did you next see Michelle?
on Saturday,
Was that June 1st?
June 1st.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you tell the jury when you saw Michelle and the circumstances surrounding that?
Yes, that day I was working in my store, and during the day we had a couple of conversations, and she said, we are gonna go to,
Object again, Your Honor.
Well, court does not know what this testimony will be. Court is not certain it will be relevant. Every conversation is not going to be relevant. So, counsel, can you sharpen your question?
I can.
Sustained.
At some point, did you invite Michelle over to your house?
yes,
Was Michelle with Fotis at the time?
yes,
Was anybody else with Michelle on June 1st when she came to your house?
yes, Nicole, Michelle's daughter, and Marisela, Michelle's mother.
And you had learned that Jennifer was missing several days before?
Yes,
When they got to your house, how did Fotis seem?
worried, he was worried.
At any time from when you heard Jennifer was missing until Fotis was over your house, did you ever suspect him of being involved in any way? in her
Objection.
disappearance?
No,
Objection.
Sustained.
How did Michelle seem to you when she was at your house?
she was tired that day.
And was your daughter home
Yes,
and Nicole was over?
yes, they were playing together.
Do you know what Fotis was worried about?
Objection.
Sustained.
At some point, did they leave your house?
Yes.
And do you know where they went?
Objection.
Grounds.
Pause for speculation.
Well, the court hears it as a relevance objection. Do you know where they went after they left your house? Relevance.
To the hotel.
Well, strike that. It's sustained.
Did Michelle indicate where she planned to go?
Objection.
Well, relevance, counsel.
I can ask a few foundational questions beforehand. Were there police outside your house on June 1st?
Objection.
Understanding why police were outside of your house.
I understand.
Objection.
At some point after Michelle left, did you receive a phone call?
Yes,
And who called you?
Maricela.
Did Marcel see?
Objection.
Well, the question hasn't been asked yet. What's the question?
Did Marcella seem upset on the phone?
Objection. Relevance.
Sustained.
To the
Objection.
hotel.
Well, is really what did you do after you received the phone call? And the objection is
Relevance.
relevant, counsel.
Your Honor, she had just learned that Michelle had been taken into custody and it's relevant what she did next.
Well, first the question, what did you do? And the court does not know what the answer is. But the fact that Michelle Troconis was arrested that's not in dispute. What this witness did as a result of Michelle Troconis being arrested. Well, let's hear the question, counsel. What did this witness do as a result of Michelle Troconis being arrested? That's a question?
It is, Your Honor.
Relevance.
Sustained.
Did you ever speak to 19?
No, never.
You and Michelle I'll continue to speak.
Yes,
You remain friends?
yes.
Was that May 24th, 2019,
Yes.
that day? Week?
The following
Was
week.
it May 31st?
So the fact that Michelle Troconis was at the witness's home, it's already been established. So sustained.
Your Honor, I just need to clarify the date, may I ask?
Well, you can clarify the date, counsel. On what date was Michelle Troconis at your home?
What day was Michelle Troconis at your home that night?
June 1st.
Okay, June 1st, thank you. Is English your primary language?
No,
What is your primary language?
Spanish.
Do you and Michelle speak in English or Spanish when you talk?
In Spanish always.
Do you never talk in English to Michelle?
Unless there is a third person, that third person is an English speaking language because of manners or respect. We speak in English between us. It's kind of weird, but yes, we do that. And certain times, though there is a third person and it's night and we are tired, we say like, excuse me for a minute. We are gonna talk something short between us because it is easier to certain words and we exchange like in Spanish. But yes, between us is always Spanish. No way.
In April and early May of 2019, was Michelle expressing a present intention to move?
Objection.
Well, that court
Present
does not
intention.
recall whether that evidence the court believes had come in already. So that's overruled.
You can answer.
Yes.
And do you know where she was planning to move?
She had an apartment in Colorado.
And was she planning to move with her daughter?
Yes,
Do you know whether her daughter is a competitive skier?
yes. And she was pursuing her career, so she was going to move to their apartment in Bay.
Okay, thank you. One moment, please. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a couple questions. Hi, Em, how are you?
Good.
Just a couple questions. You've known Michelle Troconis a couple years now?
Can you speak a little louder?
Sure, and please let me know if you can't
Yeah.
understand me, okay? I am soft-spoken, just let me
Yes,
know. Okay?
I understand.
Okay, how long have you been friends with Michelle Troconis?
8 years, like 8 years, yes.
Okay, and you would consider yourself a good friends?
Yes,
In fact, you've actually referred to her in the past or your relationship stating you instantly clicked and had an incredible connection. Do you recall saying that?
yes, we have since the beginning a very good relationship because we share similar backgrounds, not only morals and principles, also because our careers. I worked as a TV producer with ESPN International and in Argentina doing some work, and she worked in ESPN in Argentina. So we have a lot of people in common. It was very easy to get along with her and
And
with others.
I just want to make sure I understand it. ESPN is the sports network?
Yes,
Okay, and did you work in the United States or in South America?
I worked here in the United States, but also was doing some Argentina.
And you had that in common with Michelle Troconis.
Yes,
So she,
we know people that we talk. Oh yes, I'm friend with you, so it was very easy.
because she used to work at ESPN in Argentina, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And you've described your friendship as, the two of you being inseparable. Do you recall writing that?
No, inseparable. No, we are close friends. I don't remember if I from where.
Okay.
Where did you find that?
Well, would it refresh your recollection to take a look at a letter you wrote back in March of 2023?
Well, it could be like inseparable. Yeah, very close.
Okay, would you like to see the letter or?
No, it's
you're
okay. I
Okay.
trust it.
Okay. And you also described it as a beautiful friendship. Do you
Yes,
recall saying that?
yes, healthy and beautiful.
Okay. And I think you testified on direct as well that you did lots of stuff together.
Yes,
You talked about barbecues.
yes,
And I think in the letter you referred to hiking and coffee. Spent a lot of time with her.
yes.
Okay, and you care about her a lot.
Of course,
And you both have your own business, correct?
yes,
In 2019, what's the name of your store? And Michelle Troconis was a supplier for your business?
yes.
Okay, she had her own business selling rugs?
Yes.
And she sold rugs at your store?
So again,
Did she sell rugs at your store?
I sell rugs in my store. She was my provider.
Oh, okay, okay. Now, you've spoken to her about the fact that you're testifying today.
Yes.
Okay, and you've spoken to Attorney Schoenhorn about your testimony, or Attorney Felsen? Attorney Felsen, okay. Now, back in 2019, you were aware of Jennifer Farber Dulos' disappearance, correct?
Yes.
And actually, in May of 2021, the state police actually reached out to you.
Yes.
And you, Detective John Kimball called you, do you recall that?
I remember that I received a text from nowhere and I said, okay, this is a scam. I couldn't believe that the police was going to contact me by text. So I said, okay, I will not answer. And then I went to work and I saw an email and I said, okay, it seemed like it was real. And I found out like it was, I don't know if they were professional, because I saw the shield of the police and something else. And yes, it was in 700 days after the disappearance.
It was 700 days after the disappearance?
Yes.
And that you were
Was surprised.
contacted?
For me, it was very surprised.
Okay, that you were contacted by the police?
By Detective Kimball by email.
And they asked to speak with you, and you refused to speak with them, is that
I didn't
correct?
refuse to speak with them. I said that if they want, they can subpoena me. So I could go and talk with an interpreter because I knew I didn't trust them. That is the truth. So I said, okay, I will go subpoena me and I will go with an interpreter.
Actually, isn't it true you indicated you would be happy to truthfully
Yes,
answer any
because-
questions? Please let me finish my question,
Okay.
please.
Go ahead.
I would be happy to truthfully answer any questions you have for me via email.
Yes, because I felt more comfortable also because my language.
Okay.
So it is easier for me to write than to speak.
And you actually, in that email, told them that you had information that would help the defendant.
Yes, I have here the email if you want.
No, it's okay. I have it.
Okay.
You said you had information that would hurt the state's case.
Yes, of course.
Okay. But you would only answer that if they submitted their questions in writing. Is that
No,
correct?
not only in writing, I was clear saying subpoena me and I will be happy to be there and testify or interview.
And you also called them incompetent.
Yes, I did. And I feel
And-
like went a little further, but yes, I called them incompetent, but then I put in bracket that was not what I said. I said, I had two options. One, that you are incompetent, that I don't think so, that was in parentheses. And the second option was that, or you don't want to hear the other side of a story, because how you are not gonna interview a person that was sitting in front of you, looking at your eyes, the same of supposedly at the exactly time that a woman disappeared. And
Well,
I
let me-
was
let me ask you-
suspicious.
Yeah, let me ask you this.
Yes.
Ma'am, if you can. So you had, at that time, you felt you had information that could help your friend. You're correct?
Yes,
Okay, and
I
that
can tell
your
you.
inseparable, beautiful friendship, you
Yes.
had information. And since the 5 years since 2019 and 3 years since you've been contacted by the police, you kept that to yourself.
yes, because I didn't trust the police.
Okay, and if you didn't contact anybody else, you didn't contact the news media,
No, I would never talk in the media.
okay, or anybody else, just that you kept that information that you claim helps your friend for 5 years now.
I was waiting for this day to talk with everyone about it.
Okay, and I just want to make sure I clarify for something you said on direct. In June time period, May of 2019, Michelle Troconis was planning on moving to Colorado.
She was planning in which?
In 2019, in May of 2019, you testified on direct that she had an intention to move out of the state.
Yes, she was. I don't know exactly if it was May. I don't have but she was saying, but I want for my daughter to finish school. That it makes a lot of sense. So after that, she was going to move to Colorado.
And she was going to leave Fotis Dulos and move to Colorado.
She was going to move to Colorado. I don't know if she was living him. She was moving to Colorado. That is the
Nothing
way-
further. Thank you, ma'am.
The state had asked you some questions about being contacted by the police. Do
Yes.
you remember that in 2021?
Yes. Yes.
You were with Michelle on May 24th of 2019, right?
Yes,
Okay. And you had known Michelle all through 2017 and 2019,
yes,
and you knew Fotis Dulos.
yes.
You had been around them many times,
A
many
lot.
occasions. You texted with her a lot.
I'm gonna object, Your Honor. This is
Well,
asked and
this
answered
is-
in
well,
outside the scope.
This is a running wheel, but where's it going?
I'm
Okay. Monday, we've got the jury instruction conference, which can be interesting, but if anybody wants to skip it, I'll understand. Tuesday is closing arguments. I'll carry that live. And then we'll go to, when the jury starts deliberating, we'll go over to the Hannah Gutierrez rust shooting trial. I will see about streaming the second day of that tomorrow. I'm not sure exactly on the start time just yet. Sometime in the afternoon. My niece wants to go look at wedding flowers because I'm doing the flowers for the wedding coming up on March 15th. And I'm not sure how long we're going to take. So just be on the lookout for that starting. And we'll see you Monday if you're up for jury conference or jury instruction conference. If not, we'll see you Tuesday for closing arguments and jury deliberations. So, oops, let's see. Looks like I've got some. Anyway, thanks for joining me and have a great weekend. We'll see ya. Bye-bye.